views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hi, and welcome to Open Tuesday on BronxNet, a weekly program providing you the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne. Coming up, rent for thousands of rent-stabilized apartments will increase following a vote from the New York City Rent Guidelines Board. A leader from CASA Bronx joins us to discuss the effect this will have on New York residents. How will this increase affect New York City families? After that, public speaker Andrea Augustus joins me to discuss the launch of her new arts and educational program, Healing with the Arts. How can the arts be used to heal and nurture mental health challenges in kids and teens? Then, the Organization for Culture of Hispanic Origins is on a mission to free the island of Puerto Rico through protest and testimony at the United Nations. The president of OCHO joins me to discuss the relationship between the U.S. and Puerto Rico. How will decolonizing Puerto Rico help the people? And finally, recognized for her contributions to a Bronx high school, a local teacher and one of the 5 grand prize winners of the Flag Award for Teaching Excellence joins me to discuss her big win. How does winning this award impact New York City teachers? So please stick around. Open BxRx Tuesday starts now. Welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. The New York City Rent Guidelines Board recently voted to increase rent for thousands of rent-stabilized apartments, 2 to 4% for 1-year leases and 4 to 6% for 2-year leases. Fitzroy Christian Leader for Community Action for Safe Apartments, also known as CASA, joins us to discuss the effects this will have on families in the Bronx. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me here.
Now, can you let everybody know the purpose of the Rent Guidelines Board and what they do?
Yes. The board is a 9-member board appointed by the mayor, and their responsibility is not to raise rent. A lot of people think that that's what they need to do because that is what historically they have been doing. Their purpose is to look at the economic conditions in New York City and to determine what would be fair for the city's rent-stabilized tenants, whether or not a rent was justified, and if so, how much. So they have the ability to increase rent. Mm-hmm. They have the ability to freeze rent as they have done in the past. And they also have the responsibility to have a rent rollback if they think that is necessary. For whatever reason, they have been reluctant to do anything except raise the rent, except for a few times when organizers created a lot of pressure on them, and they did freeze the rent under the prior administration. But historically, they have raised rents every year, no matter what the economic conditions are. And that is not what the real purpose is.
Now, can you explain how high did they raise this price and how this is actually going to affect families in the Bronx?
Their proposal is to raise the rent between the range of 2 and 4% for 1-year lease and between 4 and 6% for 2-year leases. Now, if we look at the situation, let's say here in the Bronx, where we do most of our work, most of the folks who live in the Bronx cannot afford an additional increase. What will happen is that, compounded to the large numbers of eviction cases that have already been brought in housing court against tenants in the Bronx, we are going to be seeing a whole lot more simply because Folks have not yet recovered from COVID. This has been 2 years of devastation on the family's incomes. And to add the burden of a rent increase is only hastening their departure through evictions, which means we are going to see a massive increase in homelessness. We're going to see the city spending humongous amount of monies to provide not only shelter services, but the social services that come with it, if they go ahead with their plan to raise the rent. If they were to have a rent freeze or a rent rollback, most people will be able to stay in their homes. They will be able to last through the pandemic. They'll be able to stay here and continue to live and hopefully to thrive in the community that they have called their home for so long.
Now,
Raising the rent is going to be devastating.
yeah, I want to expand on that a little bit because I know that our city was already facing issues with rent and evictions, and there were
Yeah.
like protests about that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And, is that kind of just going into another problem of homelessness and stuff like that? Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yes. New York City and the United States as a whole is very reluctant to declare that housing is a human right, which means it is a commodity, something that may be manipulated by those who have the means to provide housing, so that they can withhold construction or they could go ahead with construction as they determine what is necessary for them to make money. They do not provide housing as a right so that people will have a right to a home in their city. The end result is the real estate industry determining what level of housing will be made available, the quality of the housing that will be made available, and how that can be used to generate profits for themselves. The city is reluctant to impose strict controls. And I will give you an example. 2 years ago, the city of Berlin decided that they were going to have a 5 year rent freeze because too many people in Berlin were becoming homeless. Too many people were leaving the city because they could no longer afford to pay the rent there. And the law that they passed also included the order that after the 5 year period, that increases can be no more than 1.3% per year to stay in line with inflation. This is something that New York City could have done. This is something that can be done to make sure that people can stay here, yet they don't do that. Paris is looking at that to see how they can implement something similar in Paris. Spain has a minimum 5 year lease. We have a 1 year lease or 2 year lease. Spain is saying tenants have a right to know that for a period of time they're going to have their housing, they can stay in their homes. So the law is for them to have no less than a 5 year lease where they can plan into the future and save money rather than be nomadic and to keep moving, put down roots, get good jobs, and they could stay in the cities in Barcelona, in Madrid, in Vienna, and in Amsterdam, the same thing we are seeing,
Hmm.
right? The governments are saying, how can we keep these people in their homes, in their communities? So they're looking at making sure that landlords do not provide 6 months and 1 year and 2 year leases, but 5 year and 10 year leases.
I
The
have a.
city can now plan with a set population
Mhm.
of skilled workers who are not going to be leaving because they can't pay their rents.
Now, I have a question about the
Uh-huh.
landlords because you brought up, rent freezing. I know a lot of landlords or a lot of people feel that if landlords don't get that money, how are they going to be able to support the building or how are they going to make money? Can you just clarify, what is the situation with landlords right now? And do they need to rely on this rent in order to take care of the building?
I'm going to answer the last question first. No, they don't need to. The rent guidelines boards have produced figures that show that over the last 30 to 35 years, landlords, except for 2 years, have been making an average of 38% profit, which means for every dollar they invest, they're getting 38 cents back. The 2 years that the net operating income dipped, and they dipped less than 2%, they're claiming that they need money and they cannot do without that rent increase to be able to maintain the buildings. Yet, if we look at what is going on in the housing courts and what is going on the HPD, which is a state agency that handles housing, we will see that these same landlords have not been making repairs, they have not been maintaining their buildings. All the monies they have been making have been going to the bank, and it has been supporting their stock so that they can use the value of their property to make money. They have not reinvested that money into maintaining the quality of living standards that the city demands. This is why a lot of tenants have been taking the landlords to court to enforce repairs, so that the court can enforce the landlords to maintain the housing standards that the city say that they should. They have not been using that money to maintain the buildings. Also, both the state and the city have programs where landlords who claim that they're losing money could
Mhm.
open their books and show the state, for instance, and said, "Here, state, here are my books. This is proof that I've been losing money." If they can do that, the state's Division of Home and Community Renewal gives them permission to add an additional increase above what the Rent Guidelines Board would add so that they can be made whole.
Now the
Not
Bronx.
one, oh, let me finish this, please.
Mhm.
Not one landlord in the last 30 years went to get that free money. That tells us how much money they don't need. Nobody walks away from free money. The city of New York has a similar program where you declare hardship and you show the city of New York, here are my numbers, these are my books, look at it. I'm hard up, I'm not getting my money. The city will give them a tax break equal to 5% profit. In the last 30 years, one, two landlords applied for that. You don't walk away from a tax break if you're not making money. You don't walk away from a rent increase if you're not making money. So the fact that the state and the city have these programs and landlords are not making use of it gives a lie to their claim that they need money to maintain the buildings. The numbers of complaints that tenants file at the HPD because of the poor maintenance or lack of maintenance
Mhm.
and poor conditions in their home show that they're not investing the money they're making in maintaining the buildings properly.
So we have about 1 minute left. I appreciate you going
Yep.
into that detail though, because I don't think a lot of people understand that. But in regards to the Bronx, we're known as the
Mhm.
poorest congressional district in the country,
Yes.
and we led the state in eviction filings for 3 years. What will this mean as we go in the future? What will this mean for the borough?
Right now, the Bronx is again leading in eviction cases being brought. The Bronx Housing Court is busier than any other court in the city. It means that a lot of the folks who live here now, the frontline workers who suffered mostly during the pandemic, they would not be able to stay in the Bronx.
Mhm.
And this actually is the last frontier. There's nowhere else for them to go. Everybody's leaving the other boroughs to come to the Bronx because the homes here are lower than anywhere else because this borough has not been gentrified yet. The gentrification process is ongoing. So the landlords now have a reason to try to drive the people of the Bronx out of their homes so that they could hopefully take those apartments off the rent stabilized rolls and make them market rate apartments and so generate more income for themselves. So we're going to be finding a lot of people who are going to be taken to court, a lot of people who are going to be evicted, and especially when the courts are moving ahead with eviction cases without making sure that the tenants have proper legal representation. So they're going to court without defenses. without knowing what their rights are, without knowing how to protect themselves. So, which means a lot of them are going to be evicted, even when they have opportunities to stay at home if they had an attorney. So, we are facing a huge amount of possible evictions over the next year and a half. And we could easily see the Bronx population declining the way it had declined in the 70s and 80s throughout all the fires and the other disasters that were taking place here.
All right. Fitzroy, thank you so much for joining me and sharing all of this important information. We really appreciate it.
And it was a pleasure helping you to get this information out to your audience.
Thank you. We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. Using sound, written, and visual art to heal others, public speaker Andrea Augustus, also known as Poetic Black Girl, recently launched a new art program called Healing with the Arts for New York City students. Andrea joins us to further discuss her new program and the impact she hopes it has on NYC youth. Andrea, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Kibin. Always good.
So, for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about you and the overall work you do regarding the arts and self awareness?
Yeah, sure. For those of you who don't know me, hello, hello, hello. My name is Andrea Corvine Augustus, also known as the Poetic Black Girl. I am a spoken word artist as well as a public speaker and workshop facilitator in different New York City classrooms. I teach different study skills to students, from how to get themselves motivated, how to study and prepare for exams, different memory and mnemonic techniques. And I've also done some work teaching art at a detention facility in Brooklyn, where I was really able to help students tell their individual stories about how they ended up where they ended up and how they can get to where they wanted to be in the future. So it's been really, really impactful and cool work.
Now, you have a new program called Healing with the Arts. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So, Healing with the Arts is a program that's been designed to address some of the emotional challenges that students face. So, prior to the pandemic, students were actually seeing an increase in suicide attempts and suicide rates. So, going into the pandemic, where a lot of students were forced to be at home in environments that may not be safe and around people who may not support them, can lead to a lot of emotional distress and challenges within students. And that's just a pandemic problem. Then, when we talk about students who were in high school as seniors and transitioning into college, and then having that process interrupted as students, that could lead to a lot of emotional distress and confusion and anxiety as well. So there's been a variety of different transitions that students have been going through, from being in school and facing a different social media, and then going from social media to a pandemic, and then in the pandemic figuring out how to do online learning, and then going from online learning back to in-person learning and dealing with college and grades and a lot of things. It can be really stressful, and not all students are going to come out and say like, hey, I'm stressed. Some students don't even know how to identify that they're stressed. They just know that they might not be feeling well. They might be more agitated or upset. So the Healing with Arts program is really designed to give students a space in schools where they're able to say, hey, I might not be okay. And let's talk about it, and let's write about it, and let's journal about it, and let's draw about it, and connect over art to come up with a solution on how we can get where we want to go. So it's kind of the basis.
So you said so many amazing things. I think what stuck out to me the most was the fact that you said that a lot of these kids don't really know, like they're not going to know immediately that they're feeling stress. What are some ways or some symptoms or even some changes that one may go through if they're feeling stressed, but they may not know it immediately?
Yeah, that's a really good question, especially for students who might run across this video and they're like, I haven't been really feeling myself, but am I depressed? Am I stressed? Do I have anxiety? I haven't been to a therapist, So there are small physical things that you can look out for when you want to do a self-assessment to figure out if you're stressed. You want to monitor, like, have you been eating? Have you been eating as much? And that's a really simple one, but when we're stressed out, sometimes we're in our head so much that we forget to eat. And right next to eating, have you been drinking water? How much have you been drinking water? Are you feeling fatigued? When we're stressed, we tend to feel physically the symptoms of our stress, because stress is a physical response because our brain is perceiving us as being in danger. So our bodies will produce hormones and send them all over our body because we're not sure if we're supposed to be in fight or flight. So you might get headaches, right? You might get migraines. You might feel like your stomach isn't feeling okay. You might feel like you have all of this unplaced energy and anxiety because you don't know where to put it because your body is in fight or flight. So being able to really sit down and say, hey, y'all, anybody else ain't been eating? Is anybody else going through that? And figuring out plans and ways to really interrupt different cycles of stress and anxiety and sadness is important.
Now, the program will include wellness-based workshops based on the MOVE method of empowerment. Can you explain what that is?
Of course, I'd be more than happy to. So, the MOVE method of empowerment is a framework based on four key principles. The M in the MOVE, it's an acronym. We love, people in education love acronyms. We love acronyms. So, the M is for message. It's helping students figure out what their message is. What is your legacy? What do you want to tell the world about you? What should the world know about you? The O stands for ownership. Once you figure out what your message is, how do you take ownership of that message and package it in a way to send it to the world? For example, if your message is that you stand for equality and equal rights, how are you going to tell the world that? Are you going to make a song? Are you going to make a poem? Are you going to make a comedy skit? Right? The V in MOVE, the MOVE method of empowerment, stands for vision. What is your vision for the future? As students, sometimes we just think our vision for the future is doing well academically because that's what everybody expects us to do. But honestly, when you're in school, you're preparing for the bigger future. So outside graduation and outside of college, what is your vision? Where are you going? What impact are you going to have? And how do we sit down and outline how we can really manifest that? In the E, the last element of the framework is for evolution and evolving. How do we evolve to really begin to take the steps to manifest the vision that we said we want based off of our message, and us having the ability to take ownership of that message? So I teach the MOVE method of empowerment using a few different artistic elements. So there will be visual arts like painting, right? Painting to release some of that stress and also create a visual vision of where you want to go. And movement. We're using movement arts, looking at yoga as an art form and how you can use movement arts to really get in touch with your body and figure out how to decompress and figure out new things about yourself. In addition to spoken word art, because of course I am a spoken word artist first and foremost.
Right.
So teaching students how to create their own individual poems that they can go and perform on different NYC stages. New York is a great place to be for that.
And why would you say like a program like this is needed, especially for children in New York City or specifically the Bronx?
Yeah. In the Bronx, we'll take it right to the Bronx because that's my home. That's where I grew up. I was a student in the Bronx in elementary school and in middle school. And then when I went to high school, I actually went to a school in Soho, Manhattan. And the difference in the programming was very clear. They had more resources. It seemed like they had a bigger budget. We had access to more things I didn't even hear about when I was going to schools in the Bronx. So when it comes to a program like this being important to students in the Bronx, it's even if it's not the Healing with Arts programs, it's so important to give these students exposure to different programs and different careers that they can pursue and different resources that they don't know that they need and they won't know unless we introduce them to. I know somebody, they do a financial literacy program. Never got that when I was in the Bronx, but in Manhattan, when I was in my Manhattan school, I definitely took a personal finance class in high school. So introducing programs like this, beneficial programs like this to students and meeting them where they are, which is typically where they have to be, which is in the classroom, meeting them where they are is extremely important, and giving them the resources and the tools that they need to thrive and really become the people that they want to be. Like the kids are the future, y'all.
Right.
So let's invest.
Now, I want to talk about how art can be used for healing, because I don't think a lot of people kind of value art as a tool that can help you in your mental journey or your personal journey. So can you quickly tell us like how art can be used for healing?
Of course. So the first thing I want to say is that it is crazy because when you look at studies, it shows that students who are in arts programs and sports programs tend to do better academically than the students who aren't. So when we invest in the holistic success of students by giving them arts programs, not only does it help them emotionally, like sorting through their problems because they get a chance to kind of paint and decompress, and they get a chance to journal and decompress, but it also helps them academically. So it's a weird catch-22 when budgets get cut and they cut arts programs, because really it's doing a disservice to the student holistically. But I will say, when I was in college, I studied art therapy and art education. So people have been using arts as a healing tool for a while now. After Sandy Hook, after that, a psychologist actually gave students the opportunity to take art, and it decreased their cortisol level. It decreased their stress hormones, and it really helped them to process some of the trauma that they've been going through. And we know that students have been going through a lot of trauma recently with the shootings going on. These different mass shootings, especially the one that happened in Texas in the school, is scary for children, and it makes them kind of want to refuse to go to school and run away from schools. But you know, having arts programs can make them run towards school to really process that.
So we're towards the end of our interview. Can you just quickly let everybody know how they can reach out to you if they are interested in this program?
Yes, of course. So if you're interested in this program, you can reach out to me on Instagram at Poetic Black Gurl, and that's going to be spelled Gurl instead of GIRL. Or you can go to my website, www.andreakaugustus.com. And everything pops below. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Andrea.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. We got the special opportunity to speak with the president of the Organization for the Culture of Hispanic Origins about the relationship between Puerto Rico and the U.S. Let's take a look at why he's fighting for their freedom. Determined to free his island from colonization, President of the Organization for Culture of Hispanic Origins, Walter Alomar, led a protest and testified at the United Nations on behalf of Puerto Rico. Alomar now joined me to discuss the relationship between the U.S. and Puerto Rico and what freedom looks like for the island. Walter, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, can you give me a little bit more info about the Organization for Culture of Hispanic Origins?
Of course, we're a nonprofit organization that we provide cultural, educational, and mental health services to the community. And a lot of the educational programs that we have one of the programs that we have consists of a documentary about Puerto Rico and the economic crisis, so that it kind of explains a little bit of the history between the island and the United States and what has transpired over the last over 120 years.
So I think that's super important because a lot of us, unfortunately, don't really know about that relationship. So can you educate our viewers about the history of Puerto Rico and how it became part of the U.S.?
Well, of course, it's not actually a part of the U.S. It's actually property. It's called a Commonwealth, but it's actually a colony, meaning it's a possession of the United States. So the U.S. invaded on July 25th, 1898, and under the flag of so-called freeing us from the Spanish crown. But it's been over 120 years, and we're still under the colonial rule of the United States. And because of the colonial rule, that's why the island is in the current status that it's in, because basically all the decisions that are made for the island are made by the United States. We have no vote for the presidency. Citizenship was forced upon us, and they basically dictate policy in Puerto Rico.
Now, what effect did this have on Puerto Rican culture?
Well, it had a big effect. There was a time when the United States first invaded Puerto Rico that it was illegal to fly the Puerto Rican flag. It was illegal to speak Spanish in school. It was illegal to discuss things of independence for the island. They sterilized over 35% of the women in Puerto Rico, 10% of the population of the men population. They invaded the island of Vieques, and it's been used as a bombing range over the last 60 years, and it has the highest cancer rate in all of Puerto Rico. So they basically just came in, took over the island, and used it for their needs, and created basically a tax haven for the U.S. Corporations. And the people have been suffering because of that, because we're just basically in limbo, and they decide our fate and our future.
Okay, so to clarify just about the relationship, is it similar to how we see with other islands, how maybe Britain, they're owned by Britain. Is that kind of like what we're seeing with Puerto Rico?
Yes, it's kind of that same line. Like Jamaica is seeking reparations, and the other nations throughout the Caribbean. So it's an ongoing thing. There are, I believe, about 17 colonies between Britain and the United States that are still present and are still looking for their liberation, and Puerto Rico is one of them.
Wow, thank you so much for clarifying that, because I actually didn't know that. Now, how is Puerto Rico still seeing those effects today?
Well, today, with Hurricane Maria recently, a couple of years ago, that was a big wake-up call for a lot of the people on the island. The United States, basically, like I said, dictates policy in Puerto Rico. So the Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA were basically delegating how things were going to operate in Puerto Rico. Shipping containers that were sent with food, medicine, water, things like that were being put by the wayside because they had to be inspected for, alleged drugs and things like that. And we basically just have to wait for them to give us everything that we need or that we want. And it's a big factor. The electrical grid that is basically antiquated, it needs to be upgraded. And we have to rely on federal funds from the U.S. in order to do that. So again, it all just comes back down to us waiting to receive some form of assistance from the United States.
Now, you brought it up a little bit earlier, but I kind of want to talk about it because I think it's so important and people should know about this. Much like we've seen in other parts of history, Puerto Ricans were abused by the healthcare system. Yeah. For those who are not familiar, can you expand on what happened to Puerto Rican women and even men?
Well, there's also a documentary out that's called La Operación, and it was done by an actual physician in Puerto Rico. And she shows how the government went around to the poorest neighborhoods in all of Puerto Rico, talking to people and saying, listen, we understand that you guys are impoverished, but you guys are Catholic and you don't believe in birth control. We have a method that will allow you to continue your lifestyle without having children. It's a simple procedure. And if you are okay with that, we'll provide it free of charge. So many of our people, of course, who were poor at the time, they fell right into line. And that was something that was done in the 1950s and 60s, and it carried over into the U.S. Once that was discovered, they landed here in New York City in Lincoln Hospital and in Brooklyn, and they did it to people of color. So the sterilization of people of color is part of American history.
And can you talk about how, like, although this happened decades ago, how we're still seeing the effects of that in our communities, and how there's a little bit of a distrust within communities of color when it comes to healthcare?
Well, in approximately 13 towns in Puerto Rico, there are no small children because of the sterilization. And also because of that, that's another reason why people were so concerned with the vaccines that were given out in Puerto Rico, because we have that history. The birth control pill was also something that was created, and it was experimented to Puerto Rican women first. So, we have that history, the sterilization, birth control, and now vaccines that are, being offered free of charge. People are reluctant because you have that bad history of basically contaminating or poisoning the people.
Now, speaking of this history, today you are fighting for the decolonization of your island. What does that mean, and what does it look like for Puerto Rico?
Well, for me, it means independence. It means freedom for my people in my community. We've been under colonial rule for 500 years, first under Spain and then now under the United States. And the island is dying. The gentrification, the sterilization, it's basically genocide that's happening to our people on the island. And it is time for a change. It is time for freedom. So I've been down to the United Nations so that I can discuss this and I can explain this to the Council, to the world, the other leaders of the world, Western Sahara, the Russian Federation, Cuba, Venezuela, Bolivia, all these leaders of the world, to explain to them that the colonization of Puerto Rico is illegal. Okay, in 1960, it was declared that a foreign nation maintaining a colony is a violation of human rights. And this is something that we push the United Nations to enforce and get the U.S. out of Puerto Rico.
Now, I understand that you have been doing this for a few years now. Why do you think it's taking a little bit longer than you would like?
Well, it's going to take some time. It's politics. We're dealing with politics in this country, and unfortunately, one hand washes the other. And we don't practice the politics, let's say the conventional politics, like voting for presidents and things like that, because we're not American citizens, so we don't have that right. But it's also the United Nations receives all of its funding from the United States. So we are lobbying to get the United States out of Puerto Rico. The United States doesn't want to leave because of its tax havens and the debt that they have acquired in Puerto Rico. And we're asking the UN to get rid of them, to push them out. And of course, they don't want to back the hand that feeds them.
Now, you talked about gentrification a little bit, and I really want to talk about that because it's so important. A lot of islands are dealing with tourists, and it's known as a vacation spot. How is that actually affecting the people of Puerto Rico? I hear sometimes people say, well, it's good because it helps people and it gives them jobs. But I would really like to hear, how does it truly affect the people of Puerto Rico?
Well, it's pushing us out of our own neighborhoods. It's the same thing that's happening here, in the Bronx and Brooklyn and Bed-Stuy and the South Bronx, things like that. We can afford to live only in certain areas. And those areas are underdeveloped because it's a neighborhood of Black and brown folks. So now when the dominant culture decides, hey, we want to come in and this could be a nice area because there's beaches over here and there's access to such and such and such and such, we get pushed out. So now we have nowhere to go, and so it's not leaving us with any out. Now, yes, it may create a job because they create a Starbucks or they create another Walmart or a Target. Okay, but at the same time, we're being pushed out of our own neighborhoods, and we can't afford to live anywhere else because the cost of living is just as expensive as the cost of living here in the U.S. And the income in Puerto Rico is a lot lower than it is here in the United States. So we're basically losing our island. Everyone is coming from all different nations, and they're coming into the island, and they're taking over. They're owning businesses. They're pushing us out, and we're basically going to become a serving class in our own country.
Now, what will it take to restore Puerto Rico?
Well, I believe independence. We need independence for Puerto Rico. We need freedom. This country, it preaches freedom, democracy for all, but yet it has a colony, 1,500 miles off the shores of the United States. I believe in freedom. I believe that if Puerto Rico becomes a free nation, that we would be in a position then to do business with the rest of the world. Because as of right now, we can't do business with any other countries. 85% of what's consumed in Puerto Rico has to be imported by U.S. ships. Now, it's a tropical island. That island, we can grow anything. And we are not allowed to do business with another nation, with Cuba, with China, with Japan, with Europe, with Russia. We can't do business with any other nation without the United States permission, and they have to oversee that. So in doing so, we cannot trade. We cannot do anything. We have to basically just wait for them to give us whatever it is that we are required. And they give it to us when they want to give it to us and how they want to give it to us.
Now, I don't think too many people, unfortunately, truly know about the situation that's happening. What can people do to further educate themselves on this topic? And how can they also help within this fight?
Well, we live in the age of information. Right now, it's not like before. It's not like when I was a child growing up and you had to, go into the libraries of the Congress and halls of Congress and things like that to find documents. If we put our minds to it and we get on the computer, we get on our phones, and we can find out what's happening in your own country. Just Google certain things. What's happening with Puerto Rico? What's happening, with the Caribbean islands? And if people want to get involved, they can. There's many different groups that are out there that you can actually partake in. My group in particular, I can be reached by my website, www.theocho.net, and you can get involved with my group, or if not, there's several other groups that can get involved. And then we have to get the message out to the general public, because that's one of the main issues is that the general public is uninformed about what is currently happening in Puerto Rico. And with everything that's happening with this, but the negative side with the age of information is that we are bombarded with information. So there's too much going on. We're kept very busy. We're very distracted with the social media and everything that's going on in the press and the trials and so on and so forth. So it can become a little overwhelming because of it, but we just have to educate ourselves, because education is the key, is the foundation to growth.
Well, how can people get in contact with your organization so they can learn more?
Okay, well, if anyone is interested in knowing a little bit more about the work I do, and I also directed a film about Puerto Rico and the economic crisis. It's called Colonization is Extinction. And it basically explains everything that we just talked about in the history between Puerto Rico and the United States. They can go to www.theocho.net. My email is theocho.net@gmail.com. They can reach me anytime, 24 hours a day. I use the film as an educational tool, and I've screened it at Columbia University, the Social School, Monmouth University, Jersey City, Stockton University, and several film festivals all around the country. So if they're interested and they want to know more, please feel free to contact me anytime. I'd be more than happy to show them the way.
All right, Walter, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope to be back soon.
We want to give special thanks to Walter for this interview. This was a very eye-opening segment, and we hope to have Walter back on the show to further discuss what true independence would mean for Puerto Rico. We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. The Flag Award for Teaching Excellence is an award that recognizes and celebrates New York City's public school teachers. Joining us today is one of the 5 grand prize winners, Cheriece White, a multimedia art, design, and technology teacher at the Metropolitan Soundview High School in the Bronx. Cheriece, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you guys.
So first off, congratulations. And I want to talk a little bit about the Flag Award. Can you just tell us how you heard about it?
Well, actually, I was nominated through an email. I want to say a year ago. It was back in October, saying that I was nominated for a Flag Award, and it was for teaching excellence and to fill out these papers if you were interested in moving forward. So you really don't know who nominates you at all. So I figured, why not go through the process? I read what it was about. It's about recognizing public school teachers for doing great things within the classroom and outside. And I felt like the program that I built should be recognized. That's always been like a goal of mine for many, many, many years. And I went through the process, and it was a long, intensive process. There was a lot of application phases and Zoom interviews and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I found out about it, but I didn't know that I won until 2 weeks ago. And my faculty surprised me by having a virtual baby shower, and it winded up being that the 2 presidents and the founder of the organization, Risa, Laura, Laura and Glenn, they were on the call, and they presented me with the $25,000 check to let me know I won. And it was out of this world, a whole outer body experience. I can't even describe
That's
how it was.
amazing. Now, looking
Yeah.
back, how does it feel to know that somebody just thought of you and said, you know what, she's an amazing teacher, we should honor her? How does it feel to know like you didn't even really have much to do with this out like when it comes to being nominated?
Honestly, just I'm gonna probably say honored 20,000 times in this interview. But it really took me back, and I got very emotional because, you teaching is great for, like, the perks and stuff. Everybody talks about summer vacation, stuff like that, but you really make an effect on these kids, especially when you care. Like, if you really invest your time with these students and they see that you genuinely want them to be seen and heard, it's the most rewarding thing in the world. And to know that not a previous, excuse me, a current student nominated me, I found out afterwards. It was humbling, and that just means that I'm doing something right.
So I want to get into a little bit about your teaching experience. You are known as the queen of creativity, and I understand that you're also known for your unique approach to teaching. Can you tell me more about your field and how you found a way to make it unique?
Yes. So I am a visual arts teacher by default, but I always thought that there was a void in visual arts education and a connection to technology. Now, there's graphic design, of course, where you do animations now and things for posters, but with technology growing, when I became a teacher back in 2012, and then I got hired in 2013, social media was also starting to boom and really take off. And I started to see, people trying to meet the void of how to content create and how to make their platforms more their own. And it's not being taught in schools because it was brand new. So what I wanted to do was try to tie in skills that, we would need post graduation in this new world. So, how to build your resume, an infographic resume, how to do a hashtag commercial on social issues that you can start on Facebook, a platform there, YouTube videos. But how do you do the header? How do you create your blog site? Wix, how do you create a website for yourself? Those types of things were missing. And I really wanted to create a program that integrated iMovie and all of these new features. Canva started to come out some years later, for our kids in inner city schools, because it's tangible, it's free, and it's something that they can apply themselves to.
Now, in addition to that, just in general, education has adopted a new normal. However, during the height of the pandemic, you used remote learning as a way to evolve yourself. Can you tell me about that experience?
So that whole experience was super intimidating and scary, I think, for everybody, you know. And we were given NYC DOE teachers were given, I think it was a crazy short amount of time. I think it was like 7 to 9 days to reconfigure your way of teaching, completely digital. And I honestly embraced that because I was a digital teacher and I had a whole bunch of computers. And my secret, don't, well, everybody's gonna know now. TikTok is amazing when it comes to inspiration and a community of educators coming together and saying, you know what can we do? What are you doing? What are you doing? And I got this idea of trying to build a platform for the kids that was virtual, a way for them to escape the house that they were in by building rooms that they can interact with, learning, teaching them how to do virtual tours through Google AR, and just also just making it fun for them, you know, just creating a virtual campus that they can walk through. And every day, I think people started doing these Bitmoji classrooms, and I kind of went a little too far and literally built a whole college campus for my classroom. And each room was for a different sector of a time period for the pandemic, and different projects. And I had a virtual gallery that they can walk through and they can see their projects on the wall. And that really transformed me as an educator, because I got to also ask them, what do you want to do this pandemic? I know it's a lot going on, but what do you want to do? What do you want to learn? And a lot of them, believe it or not, said, I want to know how to do my own business. I see on social media, people doing content creation. What is that? I want to do my own YouTube channel, and for purposes of not for themselves, but for their families and to help them out, because people were losing their jobs during the pandemic and stuff like that. And I heard what they said, and I transformed what I was doing, to have an end goal where they had a slide deck and things that they can utilize post-pandemic for themselves and their families. And some of them did. Some of them created businesses, and they're doing very well. So I'm very, very proud of that moment for myself and my students.
And I understand that you also helped out many of your colleagues. Why was that important to you?
Okay, for a number of reasons. One, because not everybody's technology savvy and people were struggling. And my thing is that I'm a part of a school, I'm a part of a team. And, you know, even though I might not see them every day, I don't want my school to fail. I don't want the students to feel bored in the classrooms because maybe just the lack of knowledge that my colleagues had for engagement and how to do it, and maybe how easy it was to do it, but starting something new is intimidating. So what I did was I asked my principal if it was okay. And I took the time out to create a 7-week extensive teacher creative course that taught them how to gamify their classroom. So, and it was beyond Kahoot. It's like, how do you build slide decks in Google Docs or Google Slides and have them interact with it? And, you know, study habits. And you know, instead of giving them an article to read, why not do a Google virtual reality of the place that you're trying to do for a history lesson? And it was just it was amazing how a lot of the teachers said that their students took notice, or the engagement level in their classroom started to rise and people started to sign on more.
That's amazing.
In order to partake. Yeah.
So as like everything that you're telling me, I think it's no surprise that you are one of the 5 grand prize winners. Can you just explain how will this affect your life and your work as a teacher?
This affected me because it was almost validation that, you know, you need to continue to believe in what you believe in and know that someone out there will one day recognize what you were doing. And it solidified why I even started teaching in the first place. And it's, like I said, it's an honor, it's humbling, and it changes my outlook on things that, you know, I'm not doing all this in vain, you know, all the long hours. Someone notices, and it's not just the jury who nominated me or the flag award that, you know, I'm so thankful for, but it's the kids, it's the students that are benefiting the most
Mhm.
And that just makes me proud and fulfilled.
Now, in addition to your prize, your school will also receive a $10,000 grant designated for use in an arts based initiative. Can you tell me about what you plan to do with that $10,000 for the school?
Yeah, well, I would like to kind of not just redo my classroom, but have it accessible for everyone that needs it. I love working with the science teachers, the STEM teacher, and some of the mathematics teachers on different projects. I would love to do a store pop-up shop fair. You know how you have science fairs?
Mhm.
It would be really, really awesome that at the end of all the long work of building their logos and NFTs and storefronts, that they're able to print out their logos and put them on merchandise and have an area where at the end of the year the community can come in, the school can come in and kind of just walk around everybody's storefront and either support their idea or their business or take their cards that they created themselves and really learn what networking is and what that's like. Because I think that's also something valuable that you need after high school that's also not taught. So I think that would be a really cool end experience for the students.
That sounds truly amazing. And I love that it's for Bronx students because we don't see that often. Now, can you tell me why are awards like the Flag Award necessary now more than ever?
Because we are overworked. No, teachers are, I feel like we have sacrificed so much for this pandemic. And beyond that, we work outside the classroom on days that we're off or during the summer, and we're hardly ever recognized ever. And it's just almost like a faux pas, like you have to, this is your job so you have to do it. But the Flag Award is something where when you're being recognized for all those hours, that pat on the back means something, and it goes beyond the monetary award that you get. It's really just the acknowledgement, and that's all we ask for, just positive acknowledgement. And I think that this is something that can be an incentive to a lot of teachers to continue to push forward and to have like an end goal and say, maybe I'll be the teacher that's recognized this year,
Right.
or but I feel like the Flag Award has definitely changed the game, and I really hope to see it flourish and go beyond NYC, hopefully national one day. It's definitely a blessing.
Well, that's amazing. And once again, congratulations. And thank you so
Thank
much, for
you.
joining us and talking about this. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much again, and just have a great day. You guys are amazing.
Okay, that's all for our show today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kibin, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.